Dave Season 2 is out now. It's been out for a while. You can stream every episode as of this recording, and it airs normally on FX, but you can also catch all episodes via Hulu, which is how I watch. I spoke about episode 1 here on the Spun Today podcast. I'm sorry, not episode 1, season 1 here on the podcast after that wrapped some time ago. And I was definitely looking forward to season 2, and it did not disappoint. For those of you who don't know, the show chronicles the life of Dave Bird, which is a white Jewish rapper, aka Lil Dicky, loosely based on his actual life. And the show is written by Jeff Schaffer, Louv Rock, not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Alex Russell, and Dave Bird, aka Lil Dicky. The show as a whole, and specific to this season, is written in a way that's very engaging. It's smart, it's witty, it's funny. It's the type of writing that, when we see Dave's perspective on things, is very neurotic. He's always on top of everything in terms of the details of things, even the smaller details of things, which to me is very relatable because there are parts of my personality that I see reflected in that. But he's so focused on details that very often, especially from a social perspective, he misses the forest for the trees. And in a lot of episodes, what we're able to see is that when he does see the forest eventually, he's often the last one in the room that has that realization. And we get to see how he corrects for that. And we anticipate how he's going to self-correct. Will he self-correct? Will he, quote unquote, make things right? Now that he is able to see and has all the information that he was lacking before, because again, he was bogged down and focused on every single minor detail and not paying attention to how his actions were affecting his surroundings and the people within his orbit. Now that he was able to consciously zoom out and see, what is he going to do with that information? And I love the show for that, because we get to see microcosms of that within each episode, which could just be me projecting, but that's definitely a takeaway that I get from each episode, and especially season 2 in its totality. And there's tons of like memorable scenes and anecdotes like throughout the entire series, funny and or insightful lines, great dialogue, and like I touched on before, moments of self-realization. But the following episodes are some of my favorites, like as an episode as a whole. Beginning with episode 3, which is outlined as follows. Dave and Benny's friendship blossoms in strange and unexpected ways, leading them to confront questions of privilege, race, sexuality, and dermatology. Benny is Benny Blanco, a music producer, which is an actual real music producer. He was actually just recently on an episode of Jesus and Mero, which I'll link to in the episode notes for you guys to check out. It's a cool episode and interview that they had. And he was either staying in the character, or his character is very close to his actual persona, because during like the Jesus and Mero interview, he was very much like the character that we see in Dave. Now, when the outline says that their friendship blossoms in a very strange and unexpected way, you could definitely highlight that sentence there, because it's very gay. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but they definitely exaggerate certain stereotypes to make the point that they're trying to make within the episode or at least within like those first few scenes, the differences between like white folks and black folks in terms of sexuality, and how like white guys will like play around with quote unquote gay stereotypes and flicking each other in the balls and teabagging each other, flashing each other, etc., etc., etc. Whereas black dudes don't play that shit. They're very homophobic when it comes to things like that. And again, I'm speaking in aggregate and from the perspective of that type of stereotype that's out there. So they play around with that concept within this episode to the point that like Benny thinks it's a good idea or something to like put bubble gum on his ass and try to fart to like make a bubble. But then the gum just gets like stuck, and then Dave has to use peanut butter because he thinks peanut butter will help the gum slide out because it's like entangled in his hair, in his asshole hair or some shit. And then they invited Geda, which is Little Dicky's hype man, to come over, and he comes with a friend of his, another black dude. And then it's like that clash between those types of perspectives. And what I like about what this episode does super well is that they'll like flesh out certain topics and actually discuss them in like dialogue instead of like, ew, that's gay. No, fuck you. No, I don't do that. No, you do that. Instead of like that type of approach, like they literally just sit down and start having a conversation. Like, wait, you never like showed your penis to your friend like as a goof, you know, not in a sexual way, but just like in a fun haha way. And then you hear like the other perspective, and it's that specific topic aside, it's an attempt to, at least from my take from it, to attack a specific stereotype via open dialogue, honestly and openly, without bias to either side. And I love that. And again, that's a thread that we see throughout season 2. Episode 6 was another one of my favorites. And the official synopsis for it is Dave joins an exclusive online dating app and matches with a pop star, which was Doja Cat, by the way. And then technological courtship ensues as Dave gets caught up in the excitement of a modern day romance. What I thought was cool from this episode is the fact that in and of itself, it's exploring what dating is nowadays, right? Like the modern angle to dating, which is not just like phone calls and text messages and, you know, it's DMing, it's actual dating apps, swipe left, swipe right. And it kind of highlights, at least from like the outside looking in, how superficial that can get, and how, just from the perspective of like swiping left or right, whichever one it is that, you know, you accept or don't accept someone. If you don't accept someone, you swipe left or right, whichever one it is. And if you do, you swipe the opposite direction. And that's based on like their profile picture and stuff like that. And if you happen to accept someone and they also happen to accept you, then you get alerted that there's a match, and then you can start like speaking to them and shit. But it becomes superficial in the sense, not dissimilar from, you know, real world, because in real life you would like see someone at a party, or somebody would introduce you, or you would meet them through a mutual friend or something like that, and you would superficially kind of sort of swipe left or right in your mind by either engaging them or asking them for a phone number, or and, you know, them reciprocating or not, etc., right? So this is just like a digital way to do that, but it eliminates that barrier of, I guess, getting like shot down and embarrassed, because, you know, they don't know if you swipe left on them, and they only know if something good happens if you swipe right on them, or vice versa. So with the negatives being taken out of the equation, right? Like that negative aspect of like the nerves, oh, what if I get shot down, etc., and the positives only being highlighted. It's kind of like online dating, at least like through these apps and shit, becomes like the participation trophy of dating, if that makes any sense. It's like everybody wins, kind of, in a weird way, or nobody loses, rather. And then that kind of trickles through the entire experience. Like matching or not matching with someone becomes like a whatever, like a flippant thing. And, you know, swiping left or right on someone just becomes like a mundane kind of scrolling through your timeline type of thing, which I would imagine transfers over to when you actually take the next step to like meet someone or date or whatever. I don't know. It just seems like a more watered down experience. But on the flip side, on the positive side rather, it does seem like from a statistical standpoint, like your odds increase exponentially, right? Because there's so many more people literally at your fingertips. It's not like a chance encounter of you meeting someone through somebody else or bumping into someone randomly. So I guess that's a plus. But anyway, so Lil Dicky syncs up with Doja Cat, and they have like a day's worth of like dialogue through text, which is great, by the way. For someone whose preferred mode of communication is via text, it was cool to see text conversation at like a high, witty, funny, flirty kind of level. And along with all its pitfalls, like, you know, miscommunications and not being able to convey intent in some cases, because if you wanted to, you should be able to. There was even like a slick save from Dave's part where he took like a screenshot and meant to send it to one of his boys, but resent it back to her. And then he had to like, when she was like, what the fuck, kind of, he had to like correct her that like on the spot in the moment. And the episode also shows like the hectic day in the life of these famous people. I thought it was interesting to see just how all the controlling interests in her life like depend on her doing what she does, you know, for their own livelihoods, but how like the power dynamic is kind of ironically shifted in that like her PR people try to control like what she says. You know, she's doing like a photo shoot under, you know, she had pre-approved certain outfits, but they brought a whole set of different outfits. So it's kind of like giving her like that false, yeah, here, you could pick what you want to wear, even though, you know, we're really going to pick what you wear anyway type of scenario. And the director for the photo shoot being late, but then getting down on her because, you know, she's not posing how the director expected, and kind of like that push and pull power dynamic that she had to like deal with throughout the entire episode, and like having to fight for and ask for lunch to be scheduled within her day, her busy schedule, et cetera, et cetera. And that was interesting to see because I'm sure, you know, it's exaggerated again to drive home like the effect or the point that's trying to be made there. But we from the outside looking in, when we do see the like stars and famous people, we don't like appreciate that side of shit that they do have to go through. We just see like the glitz and the glamour and stuff, right? And then again with the downfall in the ability to clearly convey the intent and stuff like that through the text message, the date that they're supposed to go on winds up falling apart at the end. And then at the same time, it re-highlights the fact that even though it fell apart at the end, Dave is able to hit up some other chick that he matched with that he was initially going to go out with before the prospect of Doja Cat came up. And she wound up canceling on a date that was already waiting for her at a restaurant for the prospect of going out with Lil Dicky. So again, that like quantity versus quality thing, or aspect rather, to the whole online app dating thing gets re-highlighted there. But it was definitely a dope episode. Episode 7 was dope, which is outlined as Dave and Emma reminisce about their advertising days while battling present-day identity crisis at one of hip-hop's largest showcases. So in this episode, it was cool because we got to see Emma, which is a friend of Dave's, how they came up together through like a 9-to-5 advertising agency that they worked at. And it showed a bit of the origin story between them two. And we also saw Emma be reminded of her wants and desires and how she wants to like shoot and direct. And she kind of like reminisces on that. And then we see that later, that concept, that idea of her, you know, not sort of like going with the flow anymore, not doing things that she wants to be doing, but reinvigorating that desire to like shoot and direct. And we see that bookended with her telling Geda that she wants to direct a music video of his, which is pretty cool. Episode 8 is outlined as Dave has a professional setback and is forced to spend more time with his parents. Family time has never been more eye-opening. And I really like this episode because of how it showed Dave not really knowing his parents as individual people. And I know that's something that I've suffered, and many other people, you know, different times in their lives come to that realization as well, where we kind of see our parents as our parents, like those are my parents, but not as the individual people that they are, that they themselves had parents, that they you know, have children, friends, lives, jobs, dreams, aspirations, etc. So this episode does a very interesting job of showing how Dave comes to that realization that, one, his parents are individual people, and two, that they're not infallible. And then him coming to terms with that, with how they have issues within their own relationship. They have medical issues personally. They have lives outside of being the parents of Dave. So that was a very interesting and relatable topic that they explored there within episode 8. Now, episode 9 of Dave season 2 was easily my favorite episode of the entire season. Hands down, by far. And it's the penultimate episode which is outlined as Dave journeys to a legendary recording studio, hoping to break through his creative block, but is forced to confront his greatest obstacle, his own ego. So in this episode, Dave goes, because throughout the season, by the way, he has like extreme writer's block. So he's supposed to put out his debut album after having a few like hit songs and going like viral on the internet and stuff like that. But he has writer's block throughout like the entire season. He hasn't like done much of anything. And he tries to go the very formulaic route early on of, K-pop is popping, so let me try to do something with a K-pop star, and then, ride that wave. And, fake engineered shit like that, like, just shows that fell apart before it actually became a thing, which was cool to see. Just kind of like, just stay in your lane, do what you do. If you pop, you pop. If you don't, you don't. Which I think is a life lesson takeaway worthwhile for all of us. But besides that, he had one song which was like a reflection to his now ex-girlfriend / current friend. And it was very like heartfelt and honest, and it was different than what he normally does. His manager, played by Andrew Santino, hilarious comic, a great role and great acting job that he's doing on this series. And host of the Whiskey Ginger podcast, by the way, which he has had most of the folks from the show on his podcast, if you guys want to check that out. But he hears the song and thinks it's great, and then that kind of gets Dave to like play it for the first time for his ex, and she really likes it, but doesn't want him to like put it out there, or whatever. But anyway, besides that, he's had this writer block like the entire season, right? So he goes to Shangri-La, which is Rick Rubin's infamous home / recording studio, I believe in like Beverly Hills, somewhere in Cali. And Rick Rubin, for those of you who don't know, is a legendary music producer, co-founded Def Jam Records with Russell Simmons. He's been around since the 80s, like on the scene. He's done music for Beastie Boys, Linkin Park, Jay-Z, Kanye West, Eminem, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Adele, Johnny Cash, Metallica, like you name it. He even produced The Day the Laughter Died, which was Andrew Dice Clay's like 1990 like uber famous comedy album. And there's like a mystique behind him. I spoke about Rick Rubin in the past. There's a great, I think it's called Shangri-La, documentary series that I believe I spoke about here on the podcast on Showtime or HBO. I think it's Showtime though. That you guys should check out. It kind of gives you an idea of the mysticism behind Rick Rubin. And he's like this yogi type, peaceful monk character person that walks around barefoot and brings out the best creative version of you when he chooses to work with you. And something this episode did amazingly was play on all those stereotypes of Rick Rubin and like the mystique behind them and exaggerate them and like make fun of them in a tasteful, funny way. There's a flotation tank in the episode, which is something that I've always wanted to do, and I looked up here in the city in New York. There's like a flotation lab place that you can go to and like rent a tank for like a half hour or something like that. And I was actually planning to do it pre-pandemic, and then obviously didn't, but definitely something that I plan to do. But what it was for me was the dialogue that Dave had with himself, with his creative subconscious self, with his ego. And it was just like a writer's block therapy session. So he goes into the flotation tank, and the purpose of a flotation tank, for those of you who don't know, it's like all your senses melt away because you are completely sealed off from the light. There's no light going in. So you get into this like egg-shaped tank. Door closes behind you, and it's like a pool of water, which is filled up with so much sodium that your body is buoyant. So you float no matter what, hence the term flotation tank. And the water is set to a temperature that is your exact body temperature. So you don't even feel anything. So you're in complete pitch black darkness. You don't hear anything. So it's sensory deprivation. It's depriving your senses. Your sight is gone. Your hearing is gone. At least in terms of like your hearing outside the tank, obviously. You're completely still. You're floating. You don't feel anything. And the idea is that you wind up having like either psychedelic trips, or you just like really get into yourself, and it's like meditating on steroids, basically. And again, I haven't done it yet. That's my understanding of it from how I've heard it explained. So he goes into this tank, and then he eventually winds up having this like deep conversation with himself, with his ego. And by the end of it, dope dialogue, by the way, really, really good dialogue. By the end of it, he like breaks out of this like writer's block. And during that session, like his ego even plays for him like clips of certain songs that he just like throws together right then and there, like a hook and says this, says that, and just like strings along a couple songs, and you see Dave like taking in all these ideas, and he's like, these are your ideas. This is how easy it is for you to do it if you like get past your own like bullshit. And then he comes like out of that and like jets to like the recording studio and starts like laying down music. Then episode 10, the series finale, or season finale rather, is outlined as, with pressure mounting as he records his debut album, Dave has some decisions to make about what he's willing to sacrifice. Now, what was most notable to me, probably to most people, from this episode is the argument that he gets into with Geda. And for us as the audience, it's like an exploration of perspective. Two people arguing, and both sides making such excellent points that it's like, who's right? Is there a right? Is there one right side? Or is it, you're right about these 3 things, but I'm right about these 4 things? You're right about those 5 things, but I'm right about these 2 things. And again, it goes to how masterfully this aspect of the writing throughout the entire show is, which is when there's a difference of opinion or when they're tackling a stereotype or anything that has multiple sides, like a multi-dimensional argument, you get it fleshed out honestly, openly, and credibly. It's not like you're trying to downplay the side that you're, as a writer, clearly on, or against rather, and then big up the side that you're really on and try to make the side that you're against look bad. It's like both sides, both perspectives have extremely valid points. And again, we see that throughout the show where a lot of differences of opinion are like ideologically fleshed out and explored, but still maintaining the level of writing. Like it's still engaging, it's still funny, it's still witty, it's still interesting to watch. Because I struggle with this. It's not like, and I've done this, but poorly. And I strive to do exactly the same thing within my writing a lot of the times, but I don't execute it well. When I attempt to do this, it just comes off as kind of, how do I say it? Like cold, like textbook, like no soul kind of. Like I can list out, this is why I think I'm right in this argument, blah, 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 blah. And then the other side, wait, this is why I think I'm right, because blah, 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 blah. But it just comes off as like pros and cons listed on opposite sides of a page. Whereas all throughout the show, and again, a testament to the writing, it's like done in such a way where you still convey all those like pros and cons, but in a very engaging way that maintains the level of writing and, for the viewers, their interest and engagement with the show. And the last thing I'll say about Dave season 2, which is interesting, and I wonder if they're going to play more of this up throughout the series in season 3, which is that we find out that Geda's name is also David. And even on social media, you know how shows picked up on, I guess some time ago, and some shows do it, some don't, but certain shows or movies or whatever, within their social media, they'll picked up on the fact that one could bleed into the other, right? And sometimes we'll watch a show with like a superstar that like takes a selfie on stage with the crowd behind them, and then we'll go on their social media and that actual picture is actually there on their social media, kind of doing things like that to like keep the audience engaged, etc. Geda on his social media put up a meme that I saw, which is why I'm curious if they're gonna continue to like play this up throughout the series, that said something to the effect of Geda is Dave, Dave is Geda, because I guess playing on the fact that it's revealed that both their names are David. And I wonder if that's going to be a theme or not. Dave, Lil Dicky, is always neurotic and negative, where Geda is always positive. But Lil Dicky has things more together, whereas Geda is like less so. Lil Dicky is like the definition of an artist that wants to put out good art and make people feel good. And Geda is bipolar and struggles with mental illness issues and is trying to make music. It's like a struggle for him to make his own music. Geda's black, Lil Dicky's white. Lil Dicky has money, Geda doesn't. It's like a yin and a yang type of thing going on. And they wrap the show, super spoiler alert, by the way, because obviously I've been kind of sort of like outlining and there were spoilers throughout this recap of season 2. But this one right here is like a super spoiler. So now's your chance to fast forward a bit. After Lil Dicky and Geda get into this argument, where they're seemingly going to go like their separate ways. And, you know, Little Dicky has like this huge performance on the like VMAs, like his biggest performance ever. And he's trying to do some like over the top, going to go viral. Everyone around the world is going to see it type of thing. He has one of these because of the argument with Geda. He has one of these, now I'm not missing the forest for the trees moments. I'm seeing how my interactions with Geda and how I treat Geda is affecting him, etc. And we see him give up like the planning and plotting of this like huge VMA performance to put his boy Geda on and just do songs with him on stage, on the biggest stage that he's ever been on. And he shows his appreciation finally to his manager, played by Andrew Santino, and to Taco, who plays L's, another music producer on the show. They're like his boys that came up with him. And that's how the show wraps. But I wonder, because they kind of sort of left it open to, like, if they decided to start season 3 with, oh, that was just like Geda's dream of what he wanted to happen, as opposed to what actually happened. Like, they could take that route. I feel like they left it open for that, which I hope they don't, because it's kind of like cheesy-ish. But then they could, you know, continue to flesh out kind of the Little Dicky missing the forest for the trees concept. But I think they could still do that while maintaining that actually happened. That, you know, when he does, again, see the forest for the trees, he makes the right, quote-unquote, moral decision within that situation. And that's my take on Little Dicky Season 2. Definitely looking forward to Season 3. Again, you can watch it on FX or stream every single episode on Hulu. As always, I'll link to it in the episode notes for you guys to easily check it out.